What would you do if the world laughed at your poverty, only to later beg for your respect? This is the story of a young girl who walked the dusty streets of her village in shoes so old, so broken, that people pointed, laughed, and mocked her everywhere she went. To them, her torn shoes were a symbol of shame, but to her they were a reminder of every step she took toward survival. She worked hard, day after day, carrying water, selling small goods, studying by candlelight when others slept. And though the world mocked her, she held on to one belief, that her steps, no matter how painful, were leading her somewhere greater. What no one expected was this. One day those same old shoes carried her through the gates of a mansion, and when she walked inside, the laughter stopped. The very people who once ridiculed her were left in silence, shocked by what she had become. In this video, you will learn how humiliation turned into triumph, how poverty shaped resilience, and how a girl with nothing proved that dignity is more powerful than pride. Stay with us until the end, because the twist in her story will leave you speechless. Welcome to Pure African Tales. If you love stories of courage, transformation, and truth, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button, because today's story will inspire you to never give up no matter who laughs at your journey. Her days always began before the sun rose. With a tin bucket balanced on her head, she walked to the far-off well, her feet pressing into the dust, her old shoes barely holding together. Each step was a reminder of the burden she carried, not just the water but the weight of her life. When she returned, there was no rest. She worked small jobs for neighbors, washing clothes by the river, sweeping compounds, selling firewood in the market. Her hands were rough, her back ached, yet she never complained. People saw her as just another poor girl, but inside, she carried dreams larger than anyone could imagine. Her shoes told her story better than words ever could. The leather cracked, the soles patched with scraps of cloth. Holes let in dust during the dry season, mud during the rains. Children whispered and laughed when she passed by. Some pointed openly, mocking her feet. She lowered her eyes, pretending not to hear, but each laugh cut deeper than she would admit. At night, when the village grew quiet, she lit a small candle in her room. With books borrowed and pages worn, she studied by the flickering flame. Her shoes rested near her bed, silent witnesses to her struggle. They were her shame in the daylight, but in the dark, they were her proof that she was still moving forward, step by step. Though her world was full of hardship, she carried herself with quiet strength. No one saw the way her heart ached, the way she longed for something better. She hid her pain behind a small, steady smile, but inside, a fire burned. A dream whispered. A voice told her she was meant for more than the laughter that followed. Her shoes. It was never just the shoes. It was what they made her feel. At school, children with polished sandals and clean uniforms noticed her the moment she stepped in. Their eyes dropped to her feet, and the whispers began. Look at her. Shoes, they're falling apart. The giggles spread across the classroom, louder and sharper than any lesson being taught. At the market, where she sold firewood or helped neighbors carry goods, it was the same story. A group of rich kids passed by once, dressed in bright clothes and shiny sneakers. They pointed at her feet and laughed openly. Look at her. She's walking on holes. One even shouted, "Those aren't shoes, they're rags." Her face burned with shame, but she said nothing. She lowered her head, pulling her skirt a little longer, hoping to hide her feet. Each word stung, but she carried on with quiet dignity. She refused to answer back. Silence was her only shield, but the hurt did not leave her. Later, when the laughter had faded and the streets were empty, she found a quiet place behind her small hut. There, away from the eyes of others, she let the tears fall freely. The cracked shoes lay by her side, symbols of every insult, every humiliation she had endured. Through the sobs, she whispered into the night, "One day, things will be different. One day, they will see me for who I am, not for what I wear." The Words were soft, but they carried the strength of a promise, a vow she made not only to herself, but to the world that mocked her. The laughter could have broken her. The whispers could have silenced her dreams, but instead they became her fuel. Every insult she carried on her shoulders, every cruel word she tucked inside her heart, until it burned like fire, pushing her forward. She began to work harder than before. At dawn, while others still slept, she swept the dusty compounds of neighbors, broom scratching against the earth. By mid-morning, she was by the river, washing piles of clothes until her fingers wrinkled and her back ached. When the sun reached its highest, she carried firewood to the market, her feet dragging but her spirit steady, and when evening came, she sold roasted groundnuts by the roadside, calling out to passers-by with a tired smile. The coins she earned were small, almost nothing compared to her effort, but she guarded them fiercely. She did not spend them on new shoes, no matter how tempting it was to replace the torn pair that shamed her daily. She refused to give in to the laughter of others. Her vision was bigger than shoes. She was saving for something no one could see yet. A chance at education. A chance at a future that would silence every cruel voice. At night, when her body screamed for rest, she sat by a flickering candle, with her books spread before her. Words blurred as her eyelids grew heavy, but she forced herself to keep going. She copied notes, whispered lessons to herself, solved problems in the margins of worn pages. Each night, the same shoes sat by her bed, worn and broken, but carrying her closer to the dream she refused to abandon. Slowly, something began to change. The neighbors noticed how she worked without complaint, how she studied without pause. Her quiet determination began to shine in small ways. She was no longer just the girl with the old shoes. She was the girl who would not stop moving forward, no matter how heavy the road became. And though no one knew it yet, she was preparing for the moment that would change everything. The chance came when she least expected it. A visitor arrived in the village, a respected figure who carried news of a scholarship competition. The prize was more than just money. It was a door to education, a path to a better life, the very thing she had been saving for in silence. Her heart raced as she read the details written on the notice board. All she needed was courage to try. But courage alone did not silence the voices in her head. What if they laugh again? What if I fail? Still she prepared. With no new clothes to wear, she brushed the dust off her old skirt and mended the loose stitches by hand. Her shoes, too, bore the scars of time. She patched the holes with scraps of cloth once more, tying them tightly with string, praying they would last the journey. When the day arrived, she walked toward the grand mansion where the competition would be held. Each step echoed louder than the last. People saw her pass by, their eyes dropping to her feet as usual. Laughter followed her, like a shadow. She's going to the mansion in those shoes, what a joke. She felt the sting of humiliation, but this time she didn't lower her head. She kept walking. Her shoes scraped the dusty road, each sound a reminder that she had come too far to turn back. As she reached the gates of the mansion, her heart pounded. The building towered before her, shining with wealth and power. Behind her, the laughter of others still rang in her ears. But she tightened her grip on her worn shoes, straightened her back, and whispered to herself, "I belong here." And with that, she stepped through the gates, refusing to turn back. The heavy gates swung open and she stepped inside. The mansion gleamed with polished marble floors, golden chandeliers, and walls that seemed to whisper of wealth beyond imagination. For a moment she froze, her breath catching in her chest. She had never stood in a place like this. But what caught her attention more than the beauty of the house were the eyes watching her. Guests in fine clothes turned their heads, their conversations faltering mid-sentence. Their gaze fell first on her shoes, those same battered, patched, and ridiculed shoes. The whispers began, but this time they were not filled with laughter. They were filled with disbelief. The very people who once laughed openly at her on the dusty roads now stood in silence. Some blinked in shock. Others hid their mouths, ashamed of their past cruelty. For the first time, their laughter was gone. She kept walking, her head held high. Each step of her old shoes echoed in the vast hall, louder than the music playing in the background. They had carried her through dust, through pain, through nights of sacrifice. And now they carried her into a place no one ever thought she belonged. Then came the moment no one expected. The host of the mansion stepped forward, smiling warmly. He called her name, not as a visitor, not as a servant, but as someone honored, someone chosen. She had been awarded the scholarship, recognized for her hard work, determination, and resilience. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The girl they mocked for her shoes was standing here, not in shame, clutching her certificate. Her patched shoes resting on the marble floor. She realized the truth. The same shoes they laughed at had carried her to this very moment of glory. The hall was silent, the weight of the moment pressing on everyone present. The rich children who once mocked her in the market lowered their eyes, unable to meet her gaze. The women who whispered behind her back shifted uncomfortably, realizing their words had turned to shame. Even the elders who once shook their heads in disapproval stood in quiet respect. One by one, people approached her. Some offered hesitant smiles, others whispered apologies. "We were wrong about you," one admitted, their voice trembling. Another reached out a hand. "Forgive us. We didn't see your strength." But she didn't need their apologies to feel whole. She had already forgiven herself for all the nights she cried in silence, all the times she believed their laughter meant she was less. Now, standing in the mansion, her head lifted high, she no longer felt the weight of shame. Her shoes, still cracked, still patched, were no longer a mark of humiliation. They were her badge of honor. Every tear in the leather, every thread in the cloth told the story of resilience, of endurance, of steps that carried her where dignity, not fashion, mattered most. For the first time, she smiled without hiding it. She did not hide her feet, nor lower her head. She stood tall, proud of every struggle, proud of every sacrifice. In that moment, the message was clear to all who watched. Her worth was never in what she wore. It was in who she was. Her strength, her persistence, her courage, that was her wealth. And as the crowd looked at her, they no longer saw a poor girl in old shoes. They saw a woman of dignity, who had proved that true respect is not bought with riches, but earned with resilience. As the night drew to a close, and the guests left the mansion, she stood for a moment in silence. Her eyes dropped to her worn shoes, once a mark of shame, now a symbol of every step that carried her here. She whispered to herself, "They laughed at my shoes, but those steps led me to my destiny." Her story became more than her own. It became a lesson for everyone who judged too quickly, everyone who mocked what they could not understand. The truth was simple. Never judge someone by their appearance. You cannot measure the strength of a person by the clothes they wear or the shoes on their feet. True strength lies in resilience. True wealth is in determination. And dignity will always outshine mockery. Her old shoes had carried her farther than anyone's polished sandals ever could. And that is the story of how a girl once laughed at for her poverty walked into a mansion, not to be mocked but to be honored. If this story inspired you, remember, every step you take, no matter how small, is leading you somewhere greater. Thank you for watching Pure African Tales. If you believe in resilience and courage, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that touch the heart.